Hello everyone and welcome back to another Broken Banners Battle Report. I'm going to keep this introduction short, but I do have some matters that I do want to go over first. I am sorry for the delay in videos, and I am apologizing in advance for future delay in videos. Things are pretty crazy for us right now. I think I mentioned in a previous video, one of our members, Jan, recently had a baby. That's tying up all of his time. From the time that this video releases on April 21st, I will have about 4 days until I get married, so then I'm going to be busy with all of that fun stuff. And then that's just leaving Adam, who's got his own hands tied with busy life schedules. So sorry in advance. We are going to still try and keep to a bi-weekly-ish release schedule. Second, U.S. Nationals is coming up in the near future. That's right, we do have a date, time, and place set. I'm going to put some of that information on in there, but we are looking at October, Chicago. If you guys like the game, if you guys want to meet some cool people, I highly recommend spending the time, making the effort to make it on out there. It is Columbus Day weekend, so hopefully if you guys don't have already off for work, you'll be able to request it off relatively easily. So we're looking at October 10th to October 13th as that general window. First start of the event is on October 11th, and it ends on October 13th with a teams event. It's really exciting. We at Brokered and Banners are helping organize nationals, and we're very excited to meet everyone there, to participate in the games, and hopefully do some recording while we're out there. So try and make your guys' way on out to nationals. Finally, for those who have their heads in the sand, Season 6 is out upon us. They released some information a little bit in advance of the patch, but Decisive Encounters, which we had run an event for previously, and we have a couple battle reports for on the channel, are essentially 10% of your game point build list is added as free attachments for your in-faction attachments. So no neutral attachments, just in-faction. So this is our first game of Season 6 that we're putting on out there. There are a handful of attachment buffs all over the board, especially for many of the factions, a couple commander buffs, including a pretty significant Rattleshirt rework, which we're going to be able to dive into here with our actual game. So with no further ado, we're going to dive on into it. We finally got Rich back onto the channel, and instead of playing Greyjoys, he's playing another group of horde-like unwashed savages, free folk. He's going to be playing Rattleshirt in his Bone Lord's Chosen. So Rattleshirt has recently gotten an additional rework where he's gotten some minor attachment changes that are going to give him some additional sustained, and it's going to be way easier to get his cards out. Now, when he activates, he goes get ahead and fishes out a card, either out of his deck or his discard pile. And whenever he plays a card, he gets to play essentially a second one for free out of his hand. And now the trigger is just dealing one wound. You don't have to deal a rank. It's not pillage-esque anymore. It just draw a little blood, put some buffs out. On top of that, Rattleshirt is gaining the benefit of any cards attached to units within short range. So if you're playing your cards right, and you're attaching them to the correct units in the right position, you are affecting 2 units with every card, and you're putting out 2 cards every time you're able to put out 1. It's a pretty significant amount of card play that you're going to be getting on out here. You're going to be buffing up these free folk units really fast, and they're going to be able to play in a new way that we really haven't seen free folk play, which is a more toe-to-toe-esque style, using their mobility to get an additional advantage and to choose more favorable battles. They also have a ton of great attachments they can pull from, and with these additional points, they have some really cool combinations we get to see. Great Walrus and Fens is, I think, probably one of the best line-based infantry units out there. At just 5 points, packing in battle scars with pretty decent saves and taunt and hold a line, these guys are really packing a lot for it. They're a great center point for free folk for 5 points. Are they going to match up to something like Rose Knights or Queensmen or Ironmakers? No, absolutely not. But these guys are also only 5 points. So in free folk, they're going to do a lot of work. Following them up, we've got Harma in Raiders to give a very fast strike point unit that's also going to enable to bring Harma's Bannerman, who has tactical reposition, and regroup. Comboing that with the Spearwife Matriarch on Spearwives, we have a cool little combo where we've got Swift Retreat and Regroup. So if you don't kill these guys with a melee attack, they go ahead, just dash off, heal up, and now you've got a charging volley unit in your flank or rear after Harm has probably charged her way on in with great positioning off enhanced maneuverability and Sentinel. Finally, rounding out the list to get us to 5 combat activations, we've got Frozen Shore Bear Riders. They're big, they're beefy, they are cavalry. They are not exactly hitting intensely hard at 8 points. Yes, they do get to make 2 attacks, but the range attack is pretty wimpy. Yes, they have a lot of keywords, but they're only tossing 6 dice, but they are big beef sticks that are running on out there and clogging up the board and are able to tie up just about any unit in the game, and they're able to move pretty quickly, especially when we're looking at the NCU suite of Val, Ygritte, and Styr. Val and Ygritte are pretty staple for Free Folk, so if you've ever played Free Folk, you probably know what they do, especially Val, who is basically in every Free Folk list ever. Ygritte's going to be able to give you some additional speed on your units like your Bears or your Harma to really get them zipping around, and Styr's giving you some much needed sundering to help punch through heavy armor that Free Folk often struggle against. I'm going to be playing Night's Watch. I'm really excited to play with these guys because I think their list building is probably the most fun they've ever been. It's incredible. Highly recommended if you've got these guys. I'm running Jeor in Veterans of the Watch. I've also got Satin in there, but spoiler, I lost my Satin model somewhere, so I used one of the Bastards girl's dogs, so Jeor has his emotional support dog to bring Dauntless onto his unit. Jeor kind of fits my playstyle where you want to park yourself on a point and you make your enemy react around you and your presence on the board. You're taking this defensive attrition-y kind of style play, and he's got essentially Loris's Overgrowth on a card, which I absolutely love, and it's one of the first commanders I really started playing when I started playing this game, Loris, so having something like that in Night's Watch is a lot of fun. Veterans are able to just kind of get there into the center point, and with Stand Your Ground, they're really able to help mitigate a lot of damage off some of these charges. And now something I should point out is I played this pretty poorly wrong during the game. I thought Stand Your Ground was just always no rear bonuses, no charge bonuses, no flank bonuses. I was like, wow, this is such a great ability. And it is a really great ability, especially if you can't read like me. This only applies when you're engaged to one enemy. So you're going to see some very questionable decisions by me because I thought I was safe exposing my rear and my flank, and my opponent Rich didn't catch on to my mistake until after the game when he read it and he was like, dude, you need to learn how to read. And I said, wow, I really need to learn how to read. That said, moving on to some of my other units, my favorite unit combination in the game, Ranger Trackers with a Watch Marshal. I just think it's an incredible block. I was paying the 7 points for it before, and now it's basically just 6. It's amazing and frees up space for 5-point NCUs, which I'll get to in a second. I'm also running Vanguard with Cold Hands, so I have my own Sentinel and intimidating presence on an ambush unit, which is really nice, especially after the ambush buff. Vanguard can hit really hard when they're getting into the flank or the rear, even though they don't have any keywords. And then we've got Builder Crossbowman with Sam. Because I've got so much card draw off of the bookkeeping with Sam, and I also have his ability for the battle plans, even though I never used it during the game, I think he's worth 1 point just for the bookkeeping, especially since he's free. So you just stick him in a range unit and you're good to go. Finally, for NCUs, I've got Yoren, Eamon, and Donnell. Yoren's probably one of the most significant changes I think we saw this patch, next to Balon. Where Balon went up 1 point, Yoren went down 1 point, but he's still tossing out an additional unit of conscripts at least once a game, if your opponent lets you, twice a game. So I'm running him with Eamon and Donnell, and my general strategy is just kind of survive on some points, eke out maybe a minor advantage, and just try to whittle away my enemy before the conscripts come in, give me a big healing surge that allow me to play more aggressively. For our first game of Season 6, I decided that we would play Game of Thrones, a tried and true classic that everyone can relate to and most people know the rules of. I start off by placing a weirwood tree down the center because I want to pass my morale test more than I want Rich to fail his. He puts down a corpse pile for the exact opposite reason. I put down stakes to try and restrict the actual size of the game mode and stop myself from getting outmaneuvered, and Rich places down a bog to slow me down, seeing which side of the table that I want. Next, I win the coin toss for turn order versus table side, and I choose turn order because I've got outflank and Yoren that I'm trying to play around. And I'm already going to lose the deployment game against Free Folk because he's got more activation, so screw it, whatever. So I start off getting forced to deploy first, and I'm going to outflank my Cold Hands Vanguard. Rich is then going to go, and he is going to place his Then Warriors straight down the center, which is a pretty solid strategy. I put my trackers by the ickiest terrain because they've got Pathfinder and can ignore essentially all of that. Rich is going to put down Harm Vanguard, Raiders, whatever they are, on the opposite side of the board, and I'm going to put down my veterans straight down the center to go across from the Fens. Rattleshirt's going to go right next to the Fen Warriors, and while Rich is doing that, I put down my crossbows because there's nothing left for me to do but put them there, trying to hide them behind terrain. So Rich is going to put down his Spearwives and his Bears to try and threaten my ranged unit and bully them off the board. Game starts, I go first, I'm putting Jeor onto the crowns, start racking up those tokens, and really set the tempo of the game. Rich then is going to put Ygritte onto letters, weakening my crossbow and putting his influence on the bears to make them move really nice and fast at 5 up. Next, I'm going to put Donald onto horses to maneuver my crossbows up and to try and give them some threatening range with swords early on in case the bears get too aggressive. Rich is going to pass with Styre and put Endless Horde onto his raiders. I'm going to take my veterans and I'm going to march them on up, attaching swords in the darkness, anticipating them getting beat up pretty early on and trying to make sure that they're going to be hitting at their max ranks. You could see I forget how a ruler forgets for a moment, and Rich reminds me I had an extra 5 inches to move with. Next, Rich is going to take Rattle Boys on up and he's going to march them or maneuver them with Val on the swords, replacing it to deny me my shots. I'm going to take Aemon onto the bags, and I'm going to remove that weakened token off my crossbows. Rich is going to march his Thens on up to control the center of the board, and I'm going to use a pass token. I'm pretty far behind because I do have an outflank on out, and he already has activation advantage, but I want to try and make sure I know where my ranger trackers need to go. Rich is going to take Harma, and he's going to have those raiders march up a whopping 12 inches because Harma's got that enhanced maneuverability, which is an amazing combination with Sentinel. I then take my trackers and I'm going to attach Watcher on the wall to make them speed 7 and try and match their maneuverability with my own, essentially redeploying them to the other side of the table by maneuver marching them for a total of 21 inches. Man, I love those guys. After I redeploy them over there and try and apply pressure onto those raiders and that more vulnerable flank away from the bears that can easily tie up my trackers for the majority of the game and potentially even kill them, Rich is then going to march up his Spearwives over onto the other side of the stakes because what's a few wounds if he can get onto my crossbows? I then move my crossbows on over to try and get towards the bog to make sure if someone does charge me, they're going to have to deal with my ready aim release to be able to shift myself out and try and defend myself. While that's going on, Rich is going to tactical reposition his Rattle Boys on up to try and get himself into that central position and just start piling all of his forces on out there. Then I put my crossbows, trying to give them some position over there while sitting on that point. Rich is going to have Rattleshirt make a really risky charge. I think it was something like a 5 up during the game. Get on in there and try and make me start dropping cards early with that Giga Vicious Intimidating Presence Vicious combination. I'm not taking too much damage, though, because I've got Disrupt, he's not getting his charge bonuses, and I'm only taking, I think, 1 wound off of that, healing it right back up with Dauntless, which is essentially my emotional support dog. However, that's all he needs to go ahead and put out a couple of cards, because Rattleshirt only needs you to deal 1 wound. Even if I heal it back, he still gets it. So weapon trophies, and I believe the bloody trophies goes on out, so he's going to be able to start dumping panic tokens on out to me. Bears are then going to maneuver and march and get right up on top of my crossbows, essentially daring me to outflank because bears do have a cavalry maneuver. If I got baited into that and putting my outflank unit right behind the bears, he could easily just spin on around, get up on top of me, lock my vanguard on in, and then get Spearwives to start flanking me. So I put my vanguard on the opposite end, hoping to try and punch through the disorganized raiders and then start collapsing on the Fens and the overextended raider unit. Adaptive planning turns that vulnerable token I had put out earlier with a marked target into a weaken, and Rich decides to block me from taking crowns by putting Val on there and repositioning Harma's unit to try and stop her from getting easily flanked by the Rangers, and stopping me from getting a Yoren conscript unit out round 3, which was probably a really good idea. So I take Yoren and I put him onto swords, getting just 1 token, and I'm going to use fires to auto pass the panic text from the horrific visage and get through some big damage off the swords attack, which is going to be able to help me start punching through and hopefully threaten the relatively squishy commander bunker that is essentially just saving on a 4-5 with the tree. It's not that great. After that, Sentinel is going to reposition Harma yet again, kind of playing ping pong and going back more or less to where she was before, but now Harma's got the activation where she can go on in and charge into the flank of my Vanguard. I use one of my Donald tokens here to stop them from getting too horribly beat up, and it goes pretty well. I only take about 3 wounds, which off a flank charge I don't think is that terrible. I then activate Donald, put him onto the horse, and retreat the Vanguard. Harma's now used Sentinel, and she's activated. That unit is tied up on out of there, and I can put my Sentinel unit out towards the center where 2 unactivated units are, and I'm going to try and use Sentinel to get some activation pseudo-equivalency by getting some additional actions off of those orders. Rich is going to put Styre onto bags and heal Rattleshirt back up to full, realizing that if Rattleshirt makes a hasty attack, even with the Horrific Visage, he's probably going to get turned into a corpse off of a double Vanguard attack. I'm going to take Aemons onto Letters, putting a Weaken token out onto Rattleshirt to hopefully punch through some additional damage with the Disrupt Counterstrike combo, and I'm going to heal up with the Aemon ability one of those wounds off my Ranger Vanguard. Rich and I have both been pretty crazy busy with life, so he tells me that he wants to charge his bears into my crossbows. I explain to him that Ready Aim Release is only protecting me from the front, and that he can definitely cavalry maneuver himself on over there, and then use the range attack to shift an extra 2 inches, get into my flank, and really punish me for my poor positioning on my crossbows. I don't want to reward myself for playing poorly, so I let him know that I really done goofed on that and how to help him position that. So he gets a little bit of damage off on the range attack. I don't fail the panic test, neato, but I do take a wound, and then the bears charge on in and have locked up my crossbows, whoever was really hoping would do some good damage and position elsewhere, and start firing into Rattleshirt and try and kill that as quickly as possible. The bears do a pretty big number on me, getting all of their hits in a couple precision wounds and failing the resulting vicious panic test in the flank. It's pretty rough, but there's no additional attacks coming on out, and at this point I do remember that I go first the next round, so I'm not terrified unless the Spearwives really want to try and go in on me as soon as they can. Start of my turn, Rich is going to play Surrounded and Exposed, targeting my Vanguard and just absolutely dumping tokens onto them. I'm going to retreat my crossbows to try and get them away from the Spearwives and the bears, because again, he doesn't have any additional attacks on over there, but if he is going to try and go after me with the Spearwives, I want to try and make it as miserable as possible. Doing a really meek retreat, I realize I can't get to exactly where I wanted to, so instead I retreat backwards. That makes me safe from the Spearwives, but kind of removes my crossbows from the fight, which is probably fine. I'll just tie up the cavalry and prevent them from flanking or rearing any of my other units. After that, Rich is going to take a page out of my book, and he's going to have Rattleshirt retreat, because he's realizing that a prolonged melee into my veterans with Sentinel Vanguard right there is going to end really, really poorly for him. And this is where I begin a series of my misplays. Seeing that I've got this dominant position here and Rattleshirt is activated, rather than being smart and going in on the fens, I think, okay, I think they have armor trophies on them, not weapons trophies. So I think I'm not going to punch through much damage. He's got hold of line. I'm just going to be setting myself up for failure. Let me tie up Rattleshirt. That way I can force the fen to have to play around my veterans, and we'll see what I can get off of it. This is just, in general, a bad idea, because I play my last fires to pop through that Horrific Visage panic test, keep my cards attached, and punch through extra damage. I'm trying to play really aggressively, but I don't have the damage to make that work. After that, Rich is going to play Diversion Tactics and use that to get his Spearwives back into the fight with everything else. And at this point, I think, good, the more the merrier. Get everything in on the veterans. I'm totally happy with that. I can toss out some Weaken tokens between the Disrupt Counterstrike on all of these guys that are throwing 4 up base. They're going to go up to 5 up. Again, I had misread how Stand Your Ground works. I'm thinking they're not getting any rerolls. I can work with this. Rich's turn, he plays Regroup and Reform to take some of those wounds off the Spearwives and keep Rattleshirt healthy. I don't know how to explain the fact that I forgot that he could do this, other than, oops. After that, Rich is going to go ahead and have the Fens charge into my Vanguard in the face. I think, okay, yeah, I've got a Panic token and I've got the Vulnerable token, but how much damage can Fens really do? They don't have the Weapon Trophy, I believe. I think it's just Bloodies and Armor, but oops, I fail every single possible save. I fail every Armor save after the Vulnerable, and I max out my Panic. So, goodbye, Vanguard. I should have used a Donald token instead of getting greedy on that. I probably should have saved a Fires for something like that, rather than trying to use it offensively to get through Horrific Visage. And for that price I paid, I lost an entire unit round 2 against Free Folk. You can't really afford to do that. Free folk, if they go 1-1, they usually win. Me just giving up my 7-point cavalry unit is really, really bad, and I have not much to do about that. So I'm going to use my pass token. With that, Rich is going to tactical reposition and then use that to go into a Spearwise maneuver to set up 4 going on into my veteran's flank. And I'm going to remove my ranger trackers onto the point because I realize I have to start playing defensively and hope he really goofs himself up and the ranger trackers can make a play for me later on. I go first, round 3. I put Eamon onto the swords to give a little extra health to my builder crossbowmen, and they're going to go ahead and take a flank shot after the shift back into Rattleshirt, which is what I was hoping the builder crossbows would be doing with the beginning, but I positioned them pretty poorly and wasted a lot of potential activation damage. I do punch through a ton of damage because I get pretty solid on the hits, and basically every wound goes on through, and I don't fail my own panic test. Nice. Steyer's going to take the bags and heal most of that damage right back off of those Rattleshirt boys so that he can keep on punching hard into the veterans and keep that slogfest going. My turn, I mark target, put Donald onto the horses, and move my crossbows yet further away, trying to get away from the menacing bears. With Ygritte, they do go up to speed 5, but as long as I can keep him on my front arc with ready aim fire, I do have that extra 2-inch shift, which makes it really difficult for them to get in on me because they do rely on their own range 2-inch shift to get into the damage. I adaptive planning on Rich's turn. He plays overwhelming assault on the veterans to top some stuff off and puts out some trophies after an attack. Yoren's going to go ahead, take letters, weakening the spearwives, and Rich is going to activate his bears, move them on forward, do his shooting stuff. I use my shift when he declares his charge to move a little bit further to the side. I don't take too much damage off the range attack. It's pretty nice. I'm moving off towards the side there to make sure that my center is over the bog. So he has a 1-inch reduction after he declares his charge. So I'm essentially increasing his charge by 1 inch, and if he does succeed, he doesn't get rerolls. That 1 extra reduction off of the bogs, since he doesn't have Ygritte to give him Pathfinder or that extra speed, is enough for him to fail the charge. And I get really lucky, and he fails the panic test and takes some additional wounds. It's not enough to rank the bears and change their dice profile, but it's a victory for me that my crossbows are not getting tied up and are able to continue shooting. That might help me claw my way back into the game a little bit if I can be smart and play well. It's a big stretch for me, but I do get some extra damage onto Rattleshirt. I don't fail my own panic test. Jeor on that tree is doing pretty damn well for me so far. He does go ahead and have the Spearwives shoot and charge on into my veterans right afterwards. Again, I have misplayed stand my ground here, so I don't give him rerolls on this, which, as one might imagine, on a weakened unit hitting on 5 up without rerolls, he doesn't get much on through. In fact, after everything is said and done, I essentially don't take any damage because I just dauntless heal it all on back, which I think is super cool. On my turn, Jeor is going to activate. I'm going to play Night Gatherers onto it, and he's going to go ahead and punch on into those Spearwives using swords to put out some condition tokens, and I'm going to kill them. Things are going really well for me. I'm getting really lucky, and that's going to help me, hopefully, claw back from some egregious mistakes that I've made so far, though, quite honestly, considering the misplays I've done, I don't deserve to do well. Off that attack, Rich is going to play diversion tactics, and he's going to reposition his thens to guarantee that he can get exactly where he wants. He doesn't actually want to get into my rear because he'd be exposing his own rear to my ranged attack, and that's going to really do some damage to him, so he gets himself into my flank so he can take the objective. Engaging to me is just a way that he has to do it in order to actually get onto the objective and tie me up so Rattleshirt can eventually escape. Night Gathers punches through some wounds. He does a little bit to me. Counterstrike does nothing to him, but still, I get to do more on him than he does on me after I take minimal damage using my second Donald token, and Satin heals me back after I pass the morale test. My turn, I'm going to have the trackers move on up, and I'm going to start shooting into those raiders. Again, I get really lucky and punch through way more damage than I anticipated, and he is going to hemorrhage a lot, more than half his tray on that, and that's going to hopefully give me an avenue where I can kill that unit and take that forward point, and maybe if I'm lucky, get some conscripts on out there onto that back point, and again, claw back this game. Rich is going to take Val, put her onto the NCU board, replace that zone to do a retreat, and then he's going to have Rattleshirt march on his way over and take that point. Rattleshirt is done with this game. He's put out some trophies, he's done some work, he indirectly led to my Vanguard dying. He's just going to go ahead and sit on that point for the rest of the game, because that is how you win games. Why wouldn't you? Round 4 starts. I finally get my conscripts to come on in, and I put them over by the trackers, positioned so that they can march directly onto that point, sit there, but hopefully toss out a supply aid before they go on over. Rich is going first this round, so he's going to activate Ygritte, putting his influence out onto the Thens, just stacking up a bazillion cards onto them, and he's going to have the bears, for realsies this time, go ahead and swords shoot on into my crossbows. Even with the shift, he's guaranteed to get on in, and he's going to hopefully try and kill them. Now, he ends up not doing as much damage off there, and I do have, now his watch is ended attached, so I do heal one of those on up. And I'm going to use Jeor's stay at your post to heal more off that morale test, so I essentially heal off the ranged attack. He still gets to get his charge on off, even after he loses some wounds after I do the ready aim fire and drop him rank, guaranteeing that I survive this attack, but the bears are still going to lock me up, and they haven't used their activation. So even if they don't do much damage off this attack, which they're really not, they are still tying up my crossbows and requiring me to do something in order to reposition them if they want to activate and shoot. So he's denied me swords, tied himself up, and he's still going to be able to go ahead and use those bears to charge on later because they haven't activated. My turn, I'm going to go ahead and supply aid and use Donald on the bags to do a double heal and really pump on up my crossbows. I don't use Aemon on this because I want to save Aemon's heal for later because I am anticipating my veterans or crossbows getting beat on up again. Rich is going to activate Styre onto the horses, and he's going to move Harma back while staying onto the point and making sure that I'm going to be in range of the corpse file if he does get in on me, to just try and make sure that he's putting himself in a position where if his raiders do die, and they probably will, he's going to be able to redeploy that endless horde and not really lose any momentum. I'm going to go ahead and mark target and then adaptive planning to just keep compiling condition tokens onto him. And I'm going to pass with Yoren, leaving in that empty space on the NCU board so I don't lose any more activations because I really can't afford to right now. Rich is just going to dirtle around with Harma. I do that adaptive planning that I was mentioning. My turn, I use this round's mark target. I'm going to attach Night Gatherers onto my ranger trackers, and I'm going to maneuver them and charge into the flank. My idea being, yes, my melee attack is a lot weaker than my range attack, but I get a surge forth if I kill them with the melee attack, and I'll be able to use that to take that point and squat on it, preventing him from taking it with his raiders if they charge into me, and I'd be able to use my retreat off the Watch Marshal with the melee attack to retreat onto my rear point or get somewhere useful. All in all, I'm just trying to stop him from sitting on points, and I'm trying to maximize myself standing on points. He does not die. Crown Zone is open, so Rich is going to play a regroup and reform to put a couple extra wounds back onto those raiders to try and keep them alive, and he's going to have Harma attack on in while she's still around, make use of that activation before he loses it, and maintain that advantage. He does take a couple of wounds off of Night Gatherers, so he undoes everything he got off of that regroup and reform, and a little extra, and I really don't take anything. My turn, I put Aemon onto the crowns, zap him, he's got the panic token, don't even need it, those guys are dead. Endless Horde's just going to go straight redeploy them, and he's going to just charge them straight back on in. So essentially all I did was turn an NCU zone into a 12-point heal for him, an extra activation for him, but a victory point for me. I don't know if it was the best plan. I think I stand by it because I didn't have any great decisions in that point, but if you guys have a better idea of what I could have done, that's what comment sections are for. I make my retreat using the Watch Marshal attachment's Swift Retreat off of that to get on further back, but leave myself space open after I attach Watcher on the wall to my conscripts with their activation, and then march them directly onto that point. They have to do a funky kind of pivot in order to make the space, but we get there. After that, Rattleshirt is just going to dirtle on his point because, again, he's got nothing to do other than sit there and score up points. I'm realizing very quickly, I really don't have much I can do at this point to win, and I kind of just have to rely on Rich making some pretty horrible misplays, which he rarely does, and I'm just going to attach Now His Watch is Ended onto my veterans, and I'm going to make that melee attack on into the Thens, hoping I get something really nice and lucky off of that. I do punch through a decent amount of damage, but again, I'm not entirely sure what I was hoping for off that, because the Fens are just going to go ahead, activate, punch through some damage with Hold the Line on their activation, and retreat a couple inches. I wasn't paying attention to the board space, and he was able to just retreat back, maintaining the point, even though he has fewer ranks, because he is disengaged from me. I'm going to go ahead and retreat my crossbows because there's nothing doing for them, making a melee attack or just sitting there. And Val is going to go ahead, take the NCU board, move the bears, and then the bears are going to go ahead and do their own thing to get back onto their point. At this point, I realized, yeah, Rich didn't make any horrific mistakes. He went after the points, and the score was just going to start accumulating more and more, and I was going to get crushed on points. So even though I was able to take a couple of his trays off the table, I wasn't going to be able to do anything else meaningful off that. Maybe I could take one more tray off, but there's no way I could disrupt his 4-scoring setup enough that I would be able to do anything to stop my inevitable defeat. So that was the game. I got crushed pretty bad, and again, I really did deserve it. I played pretty poorly. I mispositioned my Vanguard horrifically. I think I had the right idea with them. I think my execution was really bad. I think I got too greedy to try and get that Sentinel, and should have used them to tie up earlier, force the Free Folk to use some of their retreats, and then still keep that Sentinel on up. I don't think I was necessarily wrong for not expecting max damage off a Fen charge, but at the same time, you kind of have to be prepared for those things. Overall, I let myself get outmaneuvered by the Free Folk. That's how they win games. I don't play very often against them, so they really showed me what they could do. It's always a pleasure playing against Rich, though, and I usually lose against him, and that's okay. One of the reasons I even got into doing battle reports is because I like to analyze my own games, look it over, and really think what I could have done better. It's a way that I can become a better player. And putting it on camera prevents me from thinking, you know what, actually, it was the dice's fault. Because as I can see when I'm editing these videos and I see the dice on the table, it wasn't the dice's fault. It was my fault. Well, thank you guys for tuning on in. I hope you enjoyed this report. Go ahead, give me any strategy tips you might have for me in the comments, or just say whatever you like to. Again, that's what the comment section is for, and we appreciate every bit of engagement we get with you guys. You guys are another reason why we do this. It's not just to inflate my own ego when I win and to tell myself I could have done better when I lose. It's because I do want to contribute to the community, as do Adam and Jan. So keep your eyes on open for Adam's next video, and I hope to see you guys at Nationals.